The void of space is not just an empty expanse. It is a boundary that humanity has not dared to cross in over half a century. When the Artemis II mission clears the tower, it will not merely be another launch. It will represent a historic push into the unknown, catapulting 4 individuals further from their home planet than any human in history. While the Apollo missions defined an era of discovery, Artemis II is designed to shatter those old records. This mission aims to surpass the distance achieved by the crew of Apollo 13, who reached 248, 655 miles from Earth. Artemis II is set to go even further, venturing deep into the lunar wilderness to prove that we are finally ready to return to the stars. At the heart of this daring endeavor are 4 individuals whose names will be etched into the annals of exploration. Commander Reed Wiseman leads the crew, bringing a wealth of experience to a mission that demands precision. Joining him is pilot Victor Glover, who will make history as the first person of color to leave Earth's orbit. Mission specialists Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen complete the team. Koch will be the first woman to venture into deep space, while Hansen represents the international partnership with Canada. Together, they are strapped into the Orion spacecraft, perched atop the Space Launch System, or SLS. This rocket is the most powerful vehicle ever built by NASA, designed to generate the thrust required to escape Earth's gravity and propel humanity back toward the lunar surface during this 10-day flight test. The primary objective is a survival trial. Since the final Apollo mission in 1972, humans have remained tethered to low Earth orbit. While the International Space Station is an engineering marvel, it exists within the protective cocoon of Earth's magnetic field. Artemis II is different. This mission represents the first time in over 50 years that a crewed life support system will be tested against the harsh reality of the deep space radiation environment. The Orion capsule must protect its occupants from high-energy cosmic rays and potential solar flares that can strip the life from an organism in hours. Within this small, pressurized volume, the crew must rely on experimental technology to scrub their air and shield their bodies from the storm of radiation that permeates the space beyond our home planet's protection. There is a palpable tension inherent in this mission that differentiates it from the journeys of the past. During the Apollo era, the presence of a lunar module provided a secondary life support system, a lifeboat that saved the crew of Apollo 13. Artemis II has no such luxury. There is no backup lander attached to the Orion during this phase. The crew is entirely dependent on a single capsule. If the main engine fails at a critical moment, the mission relies on a free return trajectory. This is a cosmic path dictated entirely by the laws of physics, using the moon's gravity to slingshot the spacecraft back toward Earth without additional propulsion. It is a high-stakes gamble on celestial mechanics, where there is no room for error. If the trajectory is off, the crew could find themselves drifting into the eternal dark. As they approach the translunar injection point, the acceleration will push them toward the moon at speeds exceeding 20,000 miles per hour. Eventually, they will reach the far side of the moon, entering the silent zone. In this region, the massive bulk of the moon will stand between the spacecraft and the Earth, cutting off radio communication and contact with the home world. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. This moment of silence is more than a technical hurdle. It is a psychological milestone. We must stop thinking of Artemis II as a simple moon trip. This is the first true survival trial for transit to Mars. The technologies proven here, the carbon dioxide scrubbers and radiation shielding, are foundations for a multi-planetary future. This mission determines if our generation will witness the establishment of a permanent human base on another world. Following the success of Artemis I, this is the final stress test before landing. We know the machines work, but the human body has never been exposed to this level of isolation in the digital age. What happens when the blue marble of Earth becomes a tiny, fragile dot? The stakes are existential, testing whether we can survive the profound silence of the void. It has been 5 decades since Gene Cernan left the last human footprint on the lunar dust during Apollo 17. Since 1972, the moon has remained a silent observer of human progress, a destination that felt like a historical memory rather than a viable target. This 50-year silence was not merely a failure of will, but a shift in strategy. During the intense Cold War, the moon was the Apollo program's finish line in a geopolitical sprint. Today, the Artemis program represents a marathon. We are moving away from the flags and footprints mentality of the 1960s era, which was driven by the need to prove ideological superiority. Instead, the mission of Reed Wiseman and his crew is built on the concept of a sustainable presence. We are no longer just visiting, we are preparing to stay, using the moon as a laboratory for the future of our entire species. The technological leap during this hiatus is staggering. When Apollo astronauts navigated to the moon, they relied on computing power less sophisticated than a modern calculator. They used analog systems and slide rules to verify their trajectories. In contrast, the Orion spacecraft is a marvel of the digital age. Powered by advanced flight software and AI-driven navigation systems capable of processing millions of data points every second. This jump allows for precision that pioneers could only dream of, yet it introduces new vulnerabilities. Modern microchips are far more sensitive to the harsh radiation of deep space than the robust vacuum tubes of the past. A single high-energy particle striking a processor could cause a system failure, a risk less prevalent in the analog era. This brings us to a significant engineering hurdle, the Van Allen radiation belts. These are massive regions of radiation trapped by Earth's magnetic field, while the International Space Station orbits safely below them. Artemis II must punch through these lethal belts to reach the moon. Crossing this zone exposes the crew and Orion's electronics to high-energy protons that can disrupt systems or cause biological damage. To mitigate this, NASA integrated innovative shielding and a dedicated storm shelter within the capsule. In the event of a solar flare, the crew must retreat to this reinforced area to minimize exposure. The unpredictability of solar weather remains a constant threat, as a sudden burst of particles could overwhelm the spacecraft's defenses, turning a routine flight into a fight for survival against an invisible enemy. This strategic shift is further defined by the Gateway concept, a planned space station in lunar orbit. Unlike Apollo's self-contained missions, Artemis envisions a permanent orbital hub to serve as a staging point for Mars. This infrastructure-first approach ensures that humanity's return is not a fleeting moment, but a foundation. This new frontier also carries a different human face. The crew reflects the world sending them. Victor Glover will be the first person of color to leave Earth's orbit, and Christina Koch will be the first woman. Along with Jeremy Hansen, they represent a global partnership and the full spectrum of human resilience. This strategic evolution marks a departure from the competitive nature of the 20th century, moving toward a collaborative global effort. This diversity is essential for the psychological demands of deep space exploration, where team cohesion is as critical as oxygen. Yet, even with advanced tech, adding a fragile human heartbeat to the space launch system changes everything. For the uncrewed Artemis Thamir, every vibration was just data. For Artemis II, those fluctuations represent a threat to 4 lives. The SLS generates 9 million pounds of thrust, and while its record is perfect, the stakes are exponentially higher with humans aboard. The mission is a dance between brute force and the precision required to keep life alive in a vacuum. As Orion pushes into the void, the crew must trust that 50 years of silence were used to build a vessel that can withstand the fury of the cosmos. The sheer scale of the SLS, standing at 322 feet, is a physical testament to human ambition. Every system has been redesigned and scrutinized, but deep space remains the ultimate, unpredictable, and lethal antagonist. Every vibration and pressure drop is now a matter of survival. The interior of the Orion spacecraft is a marvel of engineering, where every cubic inch is dedicated to the survival of the 4 humans aboard. Deep within this pressurized hull, the life support systems function as the lungs of the mission. Unlike the International Space Station, which enjoys frequent resupply missions, Orion must sustain its crew in the profound isolation of deep space, thousands of miles from the nearest air tank. This closed-loop system is designed to scrub carbon dioxide from the atmosphere using specialized canisters, while simultaneously regulating the balance of nitrogen and oxygen to mimic Earth's air. Water management is equally critical. Every drop of moisture, from the humidity in the astronaut's breath to recycled waste, is captured and filtered. In this environment, sustainability is a biological necessity. Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen live within a technological bubble where the margin for error is non-existent. If a system fails, the crew must rely on their own expertise to intervene, operating far beyond the reach of rescue, beyond the internal atmosphere. The spacecraft must contend with the invisible but deadly threat of space radiation. Outside the protection of Earth's magnetic field, the crew is vulnerable to galactic cosmic rays and solar flares. Orion's hull is reinforced, but during a significant solar event, the standard shielding is insufficient. To counter this, NASA engineers have designed a protocol for a storm shelter. In the event of a solar particle event, the crew will huddle in the most protected part of the capsule, stacking supplies and equipment around themselves to create a dense protective mass. This makeshift fortress is their only defense against high-energy protons that can tear through human DNA. This constant awareness of solar activity turns the mission into a strategic game, where the crew must be ready to retreat into their shelter to avoid lethal doses of radiation. Maintaining a link to home requires the architecture of the Deep Space Network, a global array of massive radio antennas. This network is the only reason the voices of the crew can reach mission control across the vast lunar distance. However, as Artemis II approaches the moon, it encounters the ultimate communication hurdle, the far side. As the spacecraft maneuvers behind the lunar surface, it enters a total communication blackout known as the silent zone. For approximately 40 minutes, the massive bulk of the moon will physically block all radio signals. In this period of absolute darkness, the crew is truly alone. There are no instructions from Houston and no data relays. They must trust in Orion's autonomous flight software and their own discipline to execute orbital maneuvers. This silence is a profound psychological threshold, a moment where the umbilical cord to Earth is severed, forcing the crew to face the void with nothing but their training. Returning to Earth demands a level of precision that defies the imagination, highlighted by the skip entry maneuver. As Orion approaches the atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour, it does not simply dive into the air. Instead, it hits the upper layers of the atmosphere and skips back up into space briefly, much like a stone skipping across a pond. This maneuver reduces the forces exerted on the crew and allows the spacecraft to shed a significant portion of its kinetic energy as heat. The heat shield, made of a material called coat, will endure temperatures exceeding 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a delicate physics challenge. If the angle of entry is too steep, the capsule will succumb to the thermal stress and disintegrate. If the angle is too shallow, Orion will bounce off the atmosphere and be lost to the depths of space. There are no second chances in this arrival. The energy required for these maneuvers is provided by the Space Launch System, the most powerful rocket ever built, generating 9 million pounds of thrust. The SLS is the only vehicle capable of pushing the massive Orion and its service module toward the moon. Yet, for all the raw power of the liquid hydrogen boosters, the most difficult aspect remains the human factor, as the Earth continues to shrink in the window, eventually appearing no larger than a marble, and then a tiny blue dot. The psychological pressure of the deep space environment intensifies. The crew must grapple with the overview effect in its most extreme form, seeing the entirety of human existence as a fragile speck in an infinite blackness. Even with the world's most advanced life support systems, the feeling of total isolation from the home planet is a toll that cannot be fully measured until the crew is floating in the dark, watching the world they know slowly vanish from view. As the Orion spacecraft maneuvers into the lunar shadow, the atmosphere inside the capsule shifts. The persistent background hum of mission control, a sound that has defined every phase of their journey, abruptly vanishes. This is the silent zone. For approximately 40 minutes, while the moon rests between the crew and Earth, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen exist in a state of absolute isolation. There is no radio link to provide real-time guidance, and no voice from Houston to troubleshoot unexpected anomalies. In this vacuum of communication, the Orion's autonomous flight computers become the crew's only companions. This period represents a profound psychological threshold. On the International Space Station, help is just a direct line away. Behind the moon, the crew is separated from every other human being by nearly 250,000 miles and a massive ancient sphere of gray rock. Navigation in this deep space environment requires a departure from the technologies that govern modern life. There is no global positioning system. Without a network of satellites to triangulate their position, the crew must rely on optical navigation. This process involves using specialized cameras to track the positions of specific stars and the curvature of the lunar horizon against the blackness. Christina Koch and Victor Glover monitor these readings with clinical precision, comparing the automated computer data against manual calculations to ensure the trajectory remains true. If the Orion's internal guidance system were to suffer a catastrophic error, the crew would be forced to navigate by the stars. This reliance on the physical landmarks of the cosmos underscores the raw, frontier nature of the mission. The spacecraft is a vessel that must be piloted through a graveyard of craters and shadows where a single degree of deviation could mean missing the homebound trajectory. Even when the spacecraft emerges from the lunar shadow and re-establishes contact, the distance introduces a significant operational barrier known as communication latency. Signals traveling between the moon and Earth take approximately 1.3 seconds to cross the void. A simple question and its subsequent answer result in a nearly 3-second delay. While this may seem minor in a casual conversation, it is an eternity during a critical system failure. This delay forces a fundamental shift in the hierarchy of decision-making. Reed Wiseman, as the commander, must be prepared to authorize mission-critical overrides without waiting for confirmation from the ground. The crew must operate with a level of autonomy that has not been required of NASA astronauts in decades. They are the ultimate arbiters of their own survival, tasked with performing manual dockings and system repairs that require steady hands and immediate intuition. To visualize the scale of this isolation, one must consider the vast difference between low Earth orbit and the lunar distance. The ISS circles just 250 miles above the planet, close enough to see the lights of cities. In contrast, Artemis II carries its crew 230,000 miles away. If the ISS were a single step, the trip to the moon would be a walk of nearly 2 miles. At this distance, the safety nets of modern spaceflight are stripped away. There is no possibility of a rapid rescue mission. If a life support tank leaks or an electrical fire breaks out, the nearest help is 3 days of travel away. This reality transforms every alarm and every flickering light on the control panel into a high-stakes puzzle that must be solved correctly on the first attempt. A system failure in this environment is not a theoretical exercise. It is a visceral threat. Imagine a scenario where a primary engine fails to fire during a critical orbital adjustment. In the vastness between the worlds, there is no down to fall toward, only the cold mathematics of celestial mechanics. The crew would be forced to rely on the free return trajectory, a path that uses the moon's gravity to slingshot them back toward Earth. But this path is rigid. Any deviation during the lunar flyby could extend their journey by days, pushing the life support systems to their absolute limits and testing the psychological endurance of 4 people trapped in a space the size of a small SUV. As the mission progresses, the focus shifts toward the vehicle's structural integrity. The most critical component for their survival remains the heat shield, a massive disk of protective material. During the lunar flyby, the spacecraft is exposed to micrometeoroids and thermal stresses. The crew knows that even a hairline fracture, invisible to the naked eye, could prove catastrophic during re-entry. They will not truly know if the shield has held until they hit the Earth's atmosphere at 32 times the speed of sound. This uncertainty lingers as they orbit the far side, watching the alien landscape pass just 6,000 miles below, a stark reminder of how far they have come and how much further they must go to reach safety. The transition from seeing Earth as a vast horizon to a solitary speck in the dark creates a psychological shift known as the Overview Effect 2.0. While astronauts on the International Space Station experience a sense of global unity by watching the planet rotate beneath them every 90 minutes, the crew of Artemis II faces a certain reality. For Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, the planet recedes. This Earth-gazing reveals a distant, unattainable point of light. The psychological impact of this detachment is the most critical data points NASA is collecting. The mission studies the human mind's ability to withstand profound isolation in the deep space void. Unlike any mission in the last 50 years, these 4 individuals are testing the cognitive limits of being truly untethered from the only cradle life has ever known. Parallel to this is the silent, biological cost of the journey. As Orion moves beyond the protection of Earth's magnetosphere, the crew is exposed to cosmic rays and solar particles that cannot be blocked by shielding. These particles are capable of slicing through human DNA like microscopic bullets, causing cellular damage. Dosimeter data will ground all future deep space transit, including the years-long journey to Mars. Every hour spent in this high radiation environment provides a clearer picture of the physiological barriers to becoming a multiplanetary species. The mission is essentially a high-stakes laboratory where the astronauts themselves are the primary subjects, proving whether the human body can endure the harsh realities of the solar wind without the Earth's magnetic shield to deflect the lethal elements of the cosmos. Physical changes within the cabin are immediate and persistent. In the absence of gravity, bodily fluids shift toward the head, causing what is known as puffy face syndrome. However, the implications are more than cosmetic. This fluid shift increases intracranial pressure, which can lead to changes in the eyes and vision impairment. Over the course of the 10-day mission, the crew must also combat the rapid onset of bone density loss and muscle atrophy. Even in a short window, the lack of mechanical stress on the skeleton triggers a biological response that begins to break down the body's framework. While they utilize specialized exercise equipment, the confined space of the Orion, the size of a large SUV, limits their range of motion. Christina Koch and Victor Glover must navigate this cramped environment with precision, managing the physical demands of the mission while living in constant quarters with their teammates. The dynamics of this isolation are intense. 4 people, separated from the rest of humanity by hundreds of thousands of miles, must maintain perfect crew cohesion under pressure. There is no room for friction when survival depends on the monitoring of life support systems. This social experiment is as vital as the rocket's thrust. The crew must balance professional duties with the psychological need for connection, all while the magnificent desolation of the lunar surface passes just 6,000 miles below. From the windows, the moon is no longer a light in the night sky. It is a brutal landscape of craters, jagged mountains, and long, ink-black shadows. The sight is awe-inspiring, but it is also a reminder of the environment's hostility. There is no air, no water, and no margin for error in the gray dust of the lunar far side. A medical emergency remains the most terrifying prospect. In the deep space environment of Artemis II, there is no down to return to. On Earth, an ambulance is minutes away. On the ISS, a spacecraft can bring an ill astronaut home in hours. Here, the crew is committed to the orbital mechanics of the mission. If a member were to suffer an injury or illness, the team would have to function as a trauma unit with limited supplies thousands of miles from the nearest hospital. This reality heightens the tension of every movement within the capsule. They are an island of life in a sea of radiation and vacuum, documenting every sensation and shift. While the cameras capture visuals of the lunar horizon, they cannot record the feeling of the void, the realization that they are the most distant humans in history, protected only by a few inches of aluminum and the resilience of their spirits. Space is not just a distance to be traveled, it is a weight to be carried by the human soul. Every heartbeat in this environment is a testament to the endurance of the species, as they drift through the blackness toward a future where the moon is merely the first stop on a much longer journey into the unknown depths of our solar system. The gaze of the world is fixed upon the Orion capsule, but the observers are not merely curious civilians watching a historic broadcast. In the halls of power across the globe, from the strategic centers in Beijing to the headquarters of private aerospace giants like SpaceX and Blue Origin, Artemis II is viewed as the ultimate benchmark for the next decade of space exploration. This is no longer the isolated theater of the mid-20th century. It is a crowded and competitive arena where lunar dominance is once again the primary prize. For NASA, this mission represents the standard bearer for Western leadership in deep space. If Reed Wiseman and his crew navigate this void successfully, it validates a decades-long architecture of exploration. However, the geopolitical stakes are high. The moon is once again the centerpiece of a strategic chess match, one where the rules of engagement and the rights to lunar resources are being written in real time as the spacecraft crosses the lunar horizon. The shadow of history looms large over the mission's progress. The cost of failure in an undertaking of this magnitude is almost too high to calculate. In the past, tragedies like the Challenger and Columbia disasters did not just claim lives. They fundamentally altered the trajectory of American spaceflight, grounding programs and cooling public enthusiasm for years. A catastrophic failure during Artemis II could potentially end the dream of deep space colonization for a generation. It would not only be a human tragedy, but a systemic collapse of the momentum that has taken 50 years to rebuild. The safety of Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen is therefore tethered to the very survival of the Artemis program itself. There is no backup, no redundant mission waiting on the launch pad. The eggs of a multi-planetary future are all in this single shielded basket. Beyond the prestige lies a more practical economic motive, the birth of the lunar economy. While the crew orbits the gray cratered surface, they are flying over the potential fuel stations of the future. Scientific data suggests that the lunar South Pole contains vast reserves of water ice hidden in the permanent shadows of craters. This is the gold of the 21st century. If harvested, this water can be broken down into hydrogen and oxygen to create rocket fuel, effectively transforming the moon from a destination into a launching pad for the rest of the solar system. Artemis II is the critical reconnaissance mission for this industrial revolution. By proving that humans can survive the transit and the harsh environment, NASA paves the way for the extraction of resources that will make Mars travel economically feasible. The mission transitions from a test flight into a survey of the most valuable real estate in the solar system. The scientific value of this mission extends into the invisible realms of the solar system. Every sensor on the Orion is mapping the distribution of deep space debris and the erratic behavior of the solar wind. This data is the foundation upon which future habitats will be built. Yet, there is an intangible element that is just as critical: public perception. In an era of deep global division, the Apollo spirit is being tested for its ability to unite. Can the sight of a human-carrying vessel rounding the far side of the moon inspire a fractured world as it did in 1968? The mission acts as a mirror, reflecting humanity's highest aspirations against the backdrop of its terrestrial conflicts. It is a reminder that while the void is silent, the resonance of human achievement can still echo across the vacuum. Success here triggers an immediate and massive technological shift. The successful return of the crew is the green light for the construction of the Lunar Gateway, a permanent space station in lunar orbit. This facility will serve as a lighthouse and a port for the Artemis II landing and every mission that follows. We are moving beyond the era of simple flags and footprints. The goal is a sustainable, permanent presence. But this transition from visitor to resident requires a level of safety and reliability that has never been demonstrated in deep space. Artemis II is the final exam for these complex systems. As the spacecraft prepares for the long journey back toward the blue and white marble of Earth, the realization sinks in. We are not just going back to visit the moon, we are going back to stay, and the risks taken by these 4 pioneers are the down payment on a permanent home among the stars. Every telemetry bit transmitted back is a brick in the foundation of this new era. The trajectory of the Orion capsule now points back toward the blue marble. As the spacecraft burns its engines to break the moon's gravity, the crew of Artemis II is aware that they are the bridge between 2 eras. This journey is the stepping stone to the first lunar landing in over half a century. But its implications stretch far beyond the moon. The lunar environment serves as the ultimate training ground. We cannot conquer the 9-month voyage to Mars without mastering the 3-day transit to the moon. Every breath Reed Wiseman takes and every adjustment Victor Glover makes is a lesson for the future of the human species. Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen record the data that provides the blueprint for the habitats that will dot the Martian landscape, proving that humanity can survive the transit across the deep radioactive void. The technical data gathered will redefine spacecraft design for 50 years. After splashdown, NASA engineers will conduct a forensic analysis of the telemetry. They will study how the radiation shielding held up and how the life support systems managed the biological load of the crew. This isn't just about one flight, it is about the scalability of life in space. Any minor discrepancy in atmospheric scrubbing or thermal regulation must be solved before the boots of Artemis III can touch the lunar dust. The return is as dangerous as the departure. The capsule must execute a flawless skip-entry maneuver, hitting the atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour and bouncing briefly back to bleed off extreme heat. This final test confirms the integrity of the heat shield before the crew descends through the thickening air toward their recovery in the Pacific. As Earth grows back into a vibrant world, the psychological landscape of the crew shifts. They are returning from a place where Earth was no longer a location, but a fragile light in the sky. This reflection is the most profound legacy of Artemis II. It cements the idea that humanity is no longer bound to a single planet. The mission proves that we can reach into the deep dark, survive its hostility, and return with the knowledge to build a permanent presence. The overview effect has been amplified into a deep space perspective, where the fragility of our home is contrasted against the infinite potential of the frontier. This shift in consciousness is vital, for the human spirit must endure the isolation of future deep space voyages that will carry us into the heart of the solar system. The return journey leaves behind the most significant trail of telemetry in history. Every heartbeat and radio burst remains as a digital map for those who follow. Yet, as the crew descends, a new set of questions begins to emerge. The success of Artemis II signals the beginning of a new geopolitical reality, as we look to the moon not as a destination to visit, but as a world to inhabit. The question of ownership looms. Who will control the water ice in the Shackleton crater? Who will define the laws of the lunar surface? These are the loops that future missions must close if we are to establish a peaceful presence. The moon is no longer just a satellite, it is the most valuable real estate in our reach. These 4 pioneers have mapped the route, but the occupation requires a new diplomacy. As the parachutes deploy and the Orion capsule bobbles in the ocean, the story of Artemis II concludes, but the narrative of humanity among the stars is beginning its most ambitious chapter. This mission has proven that the spirit of Apollo is a living force driving us toward the horizon. We are ready to live on the moon and use it as a gateway to the solar system. The question remains, are we ready for the responsibility that comes with being a spacefaring civilization? The journey is long, the environment is harsh, but the potential is limitless. It is time to decide if we will stay sheltered on our home world or take the next step into the grand unknown. Your support fuels these missions. Consider what part you will play in this new age of discovery as we leave the cradle of Earth and reach for the stars.